FreeBSD power control using PowerD. That's what this video is about. Hey memers and streamers, it's Fracken here again. So real quick, we're going to minimize my beautiful countenance since we have to look at the screen that we're going to be talking about. But yeah, this video is about PowerD in FreeBSD, the power control daemon. And I'm going to be using a script, this thing right here, to be able to keep myself on track for this particular video. So why would you want to fiddle with PowerD or power control at all in FreeBSD? And there's multiple answers to that, right? Some of the more obvious is, make your system cooler, make it more responsive, depending on the load and so on and so forth. But there's all kinds of reasons that you might want to fiddle with this. But regardless of how why you're going to do it, the way that you're going to do it in FreeBSD, if you do, is through PowerD. And that's what we're going to talk about. So, I guess I already minimized myself, so I didn't need to talk about that. So, PowerD is just the power control daemon in FreeBSD. That's all it does. There's no other, flags that you can set and, make it twiddle a video driver or something, or all it does is controls the power, and it has some pretty powerful tools. You can control your minimum clock speed, your maximum clock speed. You can control whether or not you go into maximum boost clock. You can control how rapidly it ramps that clocks up, how rapidly it ramps them down, and under what load levels that it does that. But we're going to cover all that. So PowerD itself is just a daemon. It runs in the Windows world, you would call it a service. But in the Unix world or Linux world or, BSD world, whatever you want to call it, we generally refer to services as a daemon. Let's see here. Okay. So, yeah, one of the things that you may not notice, you could use FreeBSD for years and not notice this if you've, followed the handbook and pretty much done what you're supposed to do when you install a new installation. And that particular issue is that in a lot of machines, if you boot them up or kill the process so that you don't have any PowerD running, what can happen is you can be stuck at the minimum clock that machine will either boot with or that it has available. As a good example of that, my Raspberry Pi, when it boots, if there's no, or you kill the process, it drops back down to 800 megahertz. Maybe it's 400 megahertz now that I think about it. I can't remember. It's low, whatever the base is anyway. And the same with the machine that we're looking at here. This machine here, if you kill that, or whatever, it will drop it back down to 400 megahertz. Now, I'm going to do something here. I'm going to bring over a little shell script that I have whipped up many, many years ago that all it does is it tells us the temperature. It's the one that's in red. This one right here, this is what we're talking about. So this will be our system monitor for this entire video. So it tells us what the temperature of the CPU is. In this case right now, it's just bouncing a little bit below 60. It tells us what our current CPU frequency is. And right now we're bouncing 26, 29. Sometimes it'll drop depending on load. And it tells us what our fan speed is. And the fan speed gives you another good idea of the overall thermal load on the system. Okay, so let's have another look at our script here. So we talked about that. So yeah, like I say, the good news is if you're installing a new system and you followed the handbook, you can ignore this because the handbook specifically tells you how to configure PowerD in your rc.conf, which is this window right here that I'm shaking right here, right now. That's the rc.conf of this particular machine. And as you can see, we've got all kinds of PowerD flags. And in this case, when it boots up with PowerD enabled, yes. It boots up with the flag of adaptive. Oh, excuse me. And, as far as minimum, maximum, and all that kind of stuff, it just, anyway. So moving on. So why do we call it a daemon or a daemon? Now, the term kind of brings forth, the kinds of ideas that, like religious ideas of, something that, some scary demon that wants to bite your face, or, when you get out of bed at night, you're like, ooh, scared that something's going to grab your feet from under the bed, the demon under your bed. That's not really what we mean when it comes to services and using the word daemon. And daemon and daemon are kind of counter exchangeable. That's not the right word, but like you can exchange those words. Most of the time we refer to them as daemons, D-A-E-M-O-N, daemon. But all it means is it's just a really simple little process, and it just does one thing. It's a little daemon, a little entity, and all it does is it just does its little tiny job, whatever that job is, and that's the only thing it does. A good example of that is in common culture is back in 1867, so before the turn of the century, last century, I guess, James Clerk Maxwell had the little daemon in his physics thought experiment where, you had a little box and this little guy in the middle that would open and close this little shutter as, atoms or molecules of various energies we're trying to get through. But in the Unix world or the Linux world, we just refer to, use that word to refer to services. So now why did I need to get doing this stuff in the first place? Well, the reason is this laptop. Now, this particular laptop is a T440p, right there, with an i7-4910MQ CPU upgrade. This is one of the workstation class ThinkPads, which means the CPU is socketed, so you can just throw that one in the garbage and blink and stick a new one in. So this is what that laptop looks like, or this laptop. And the original CPUs, most of them that went into here were 37 watt, so just sub 40 watt CPUs, and they kind of did that for a reason, because by the time you got to the 50 watt ones, it was not good. It was hot. And so the i7-4910MQ has a TDP of 47 watts wide open, which means you got this little tiny cooler here. This is what it looks like on the underside, or under the lid on the bottom. But the CPU is right here where I'm moving my cursor. In fact, I'm going to move my little thingamajigger over right here. That's where the CPU lies, and we're going to use that as an extra easy to follow cursor. And all that heat has to follow that heat pipe up to this fan up here, and that one fan cools the entire thing. So what did I do? Well, actually we're going to go back. So this is the actual log file of this particular machine, and you'll notice it's like, core temp 0, critical temperature detected, suggest system shutdown. And we go a little bit down below. There's another one, and there's a reason for that, because these 4910MQs are hot. So hot, in fact, that I had to do this. I made some little thermal bridges. This is the heat spreader on the bottom here, and cleaned all of that up as much as I could and got down to bare copper, and then we stuck a little bit of thermal paste on the whole thing. That's solid copper. These things are solid copper, about, quarter inch thick, and then bridged that entire thing all the way over. And in fact, the very tippity top of that is actually touching that heatsink on there. So it went a long ways to cooling this thing off. But still, there's times where, like I'm pretty much housebound, so I don't really leave the house, which means I'm using it on this nice fuzzy house coat, which means I'm blocking the bottom vents a lot of the time, which means that can get out of control at times. So, we're only at, we're bouncing between, barely 2000, and sometimes, like 1700 megahertz up to, just right at maximum clock, but, it's not bad. But anyway, so again, we're going to talk about this because this is important. You're going to need to know this later on. So this particular CPU in this particular laptop is what we're going to use for our demonstration, because we're going to demo a whole bunch of different stuff about using PowerD and how it works and all that. So this particular CPU is an i7-4910MQ, and it has a base clock, lowest clock rate of 0.8 gigahertz or 800 megahertz, and its maximum non-boost clock, that's important, non-boost, is 2.9 gigahertz or 2900 megahertz. And the boost clock on this is 3.9 gigahertz, which is 3900 megahertz, so just about 4 gigahertz. So our maximum non-boost is about, right around 3 gigahertz. Our maximum boost clock is right around 4. Okay, so the basics. PowerD by default runs out of the rc.conf when you start the machine. Simple, right? So again, if you've been following the instructions in the handbook, most of the time you probably won't need to deal with it, and you can just ignore this video and, I don't know, go watch a fun video on YouTube. But if you want to go a little further, let's do that. So PowerD is a service, which means that you can start and stop it using the service control subsystem in FreeBSD. And this here is how you do that. So you type service at a, like just, let's see here, random shell. So, you'd be like, so say we're going to restart the, I don't know, the network. So it'd be service, and then whatever that service is. In the case of the network, it'd be netif, network interface. And if we're going to, say we're going to stop it, because we want to kill network traffic for some reason. Stop. That's it. Hit enter and away you go. So that's all there is to that. But there's various things. You can do you can start a service, you can stop a service, you can restart a service. So that's your main options. So if you want to know what the different frequencies that are available for your particular CPU, you can use a sysctl command. And sysctl does all kinds of things, right? Like here's an example. We'll just do that. It'll spit out all kinds of information if you need it to. But so this here gives you a list of all the potential frequencies that your CPU can manage, all the way from 800 all the way up to 2901, which is a boost clock. So 2900 is your maximum non-boost clock. 2901 is your maximum boost clock, and 800 is the lowest that you could possibly get the system to do. Now let's have a look and see what the current frequency is. So you can detect what the current frequency is, again, with another sysctl command, 2000. Now you'll notice it's a little bit out of sync with that, but if we do this, you'll notice it's roughly about the same, right? What you see here, in fact, this script uses that command to be able to spit that stuff out. So anyway, those are some helpful commands that you can use while you're working with PowerD. Now, you can stuff this, all the things that we're doing here, into shell scripts. In fact, the script that we're going to use here is a shell script called test.sh, and it is in the root shell script /temp directory. In fact, if we get out of here and we have a look, root shell scripts temp directory. Okay, so we're going to go back to that and go back to our script here. So we're going to demonstrate a few things using, oh my gosh, my brain just dropped it, PowerD. Yeah, that's fun, isn't it? Okay, so we're going to ignore all of this stuff over here. We'll talk about that later. But what we're going to do first, you remember that over here, we're going to go back up, and we're going to, well, getting crazy with the mouse here. We're going to take a look and see what the lowest clock speed that we can have is. Okay, so 800. So in our script, we've already got the, we're kind of cheating there, right? But we're just demonstrating. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the minimum and maximum to 800. I apologize if the recording for my display goes all funky. We're recording on the machine that we're testing this on. So we're going to save that, and we're going to run that shell script, and watch what happens. Immediately, our current frequency drops to 800, and it locks it there. Stays there. Stays at 800 megahertz. Okay, so we're going to try something else. Okay, so that was doing locking it to 800 megahertz. Let's take a look again here. So we've got other options. We've got 800 megahertz, we've got 900 megahertz. Okay, well, let's try that. So I should explain what these are. So what we're doing is both A and B profiles, one's for battery, one's for line power, right? And so you can have like an adaptive or high adaptive depending on, whatever. And, this is all set up, explains it up here. The man page goes into this more details, but we're going to set 800 for the minimum, 900 for the maximum. Okay. We're going to restart that. And again, what that script does is it stops PowerD and then restarts it again from that shell script. Okay, so do that again. And now all of a sudden, we're at 900 megahertz. Now, hopefully it's not breaking the recording. I won't know until afterwards. But so, right now there's enough load. If you look at our little display that I have down here, what's interesting about this is you'll notice at higher clock speeds, it appeared like there was less load on the system. And what that's really telling you is it's telling you how many free clock cycles there are. So at a frequency of 900 megahertz, 0.9 gigahertz, there's a fairly hefty load. Like, we're kind of bouncing around. I don't know. Let's see here. There's times where 20 to 50%, it's a little fast to be able to tell what the average is. Oh, a couple of them were even at 100 there. But let's have another look. So 1700 is an option. Let's try 1700. Make sure we output a buffer. Run that script again. And bam, 1700. Now watch what happens here. You'll notice that it looks like immediately, as soon as I change that, it looks like the load drops on our box. And it kind of does. We have more free clock cycles. Now, what we're going to do now, so we know that we have a maximum boost of 2901, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to set this back to 800 for a little bit, just so we can get a little bit on the graph down here, so you can really see how well this works. Okay, so we locked it back to 800. We're going to let this buffer out a little bit. We're going to set this to 2901 while we're doing it. We're going to save it. Now, we're still at 800 megahertz. So you see how high the load on the system is. And what we're going to do now is we're going to immediately, because I've already saved that shell script, when I run it, it will change the maximum boost or the maximum clock up to maximum boost, which is 4 gigahertz roughly. Okay, now watch the graph. Watch that graph down here on this window when that happens. Okay, bam. Clock rate is 2901 maximum boost, and you'll notice it immediately, that graph is like, now it's nice and thin. And that's because we've got a lot more clock cycles available to us if we need to be. And even though our maximum is 2901, you'll notice that it's not always keeping it there. If there's a spike in the CPU use, it'll ramp it up. And if the overall load on the machine drops, it starts bringing it down. And that's what it does. It hunts up and down. And it's, that's PowerD's whole reason to exist, is to try and optimize the clock speed of the machine for the workload. Because the truth of the matter is, imagine you've got like a dual socket Threadripper, and I don't know what they have for power dissipation, but say they're 500 watts each. They're probably more than that, I don't know. But so pretend that just your CPUs alone could pull a kilowatt from the wall, right? So what happens if you're at max boost clock all the time? You may not have instructions running, so it's not going to be at its drawing its full load, but they're going to be, when they are doing instructions, they're doing it as fast as they possibly can, which is almost always far less efficient than running the clock a little bit slower or a lot slower and doing those same instructions. So PowerD can be useful, or any power service for that matter. Okay, so now again, remember we were talking earlier about the boost clock of this machine. So you'll notice that even though this CPU is capable of 3.9 gigahertz, just about 4, it never reports as that. And here's what happens. So we're just going to, well, no, we have to put that back. So this script here will run the machine right to maximum clock, not maximum boost clock, but maximum clock. And you'll notice that it's peaking at 2900. Now, I'm just going to make this number big. I'm going to make it, say, 4 gigahertz. and watch what happens. Come on, come on, come on. Waiting for a big bump in CPU use here. Come on. Big bump. Yeah, 2901. Okay, so that 2901, we go back and you'll notice that that's the highest level. This is a quirk that you need to know about PowerD. So when you're at maximum clock, it'll just tell you like look at the big jumps, 2700, 2900, 2901. Like why would you have an increment of 1 megahertz, literally 1 megahertz? And the reason is, I don't know exactly why they don't report the exact boost clock. I get the distinct feeling that detecting that and properly reporting it is probably non-trivial in code. I don't know, maybe even there's some kind of, like end user agreements between, commercial software vendors or something, or some, I don't know. But anyway, in the case of FreeBSD, when you're at max clock, it'll report whatever your max clock is. And when you go into max boost, even if it's like the difference between 2 gigahertz to 3 gigahertz, right? It's not going to show you that. It's going to take whatever your max clock rate is, and it's going to be one more, just one. So again, 2900 is not boost clock. 2901 is max boost clock. And in this case, 2901 is actually 3.9 gigahertz. So, okay, so we mentioned the -I and -R flags. So let's cover those now. So these two flags here, if we take a look at our little description here, idle CPU value before lowering the clock and busy CPU before raising the clock. So what we're going to do here is we're going to run a top. And I want you to notice how it reports the amount of CPU being used. It doesn't tell you CPU in use. It tells you what CPU or how much is idle. In this case, 87% idle, right? And this stuff is kind of confusing. Like myself, I can't even quite keep it straight in my head as to what's what. So basically, I just fiddle with the numbers until it acts proper. Basically, right? Like, short of running it on like a production server, I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? It's like, oh my gosh, it's not ramping the clock speed up enough. I have to change that number and save the buffer and run it again. Oh darn, right? But yeah, I mean, that's the basics for PowerD. It's not really rocket science, And one of the reasons why I've kind of been thinking about this even more. I mean, beyond trying to keep the thermals down, because again, fluffy house code. And what I've been doing for the last week is I've been writing C code again. I've been writing a little system monitor that I love that little cube, and that little wiggly cube just twiddles my brain. So I'm making another little teeny tiny little system monitor that does a few other things besides that. But you got to write it in C, and so I'm sitting there doing a lot of C code, and there's times where like a single wayward browser tab, like one browser tab. Well, where am I going here? One browser tab of whatever loses its mind, and all of a sudden, you're in full boost clock, and your lap's burning, your fingers are burning. It's like, what the hell is going on? So basically, I've set it so that this, in fact, that test.sh script, this one right here that we've been using for test, that's actually my main script that I've been using lately for controlling PowerD, and those settings that you see right there. In fact, if we just go back down and we set that back to 2901. 2901. That'll be my power control script for the foreseeable future on this machine. But you can use this kind of thing for all sorts of stuff. Like as an example, say you've got a great big rack full of machines that are doing big jobs. Like for me, I've got jobs that sometimes last for weeks on end. Like say you've got, I don't know, 5 gigs worth of 5 terabytes worth of videos, and you want to transcode from H.264 to H.265. That's a big job, especially if you're doing it in software. If you want quality, which is, I'm sorry, hardware's fast, but the quality of software compression is vastly superior to hardware, especially at really low bit rates. So you may be sitting there at 100% CPU saturation for weeks on end. That can run into some money, right? I've got jobs where I've sat down and done the math, and you know, I'll spend like, you know, $50-$60 in power just transcoding a big transcode job. So there might be times where, like as an example, say you got a big solar setup, you know, a big solar setup on the roof. So you've got basically free power during the day, and you're paying for it at night or using it from your batteries and you don't want to. Or you get cheap power from the power grid at night. You know, if you're whatever the heck they call that metering, where you get, you know, they monitor the power and, you know, change the cost over the period of the day. You could use a power control script, or a set of them, in fact. Do I have a set of those set up? It seems to me I do. Oh, actually, you know what? Yeah. So I made a fake cron tab here. So as an example, you know, while the sun is up at 9 o'clock in the morning, so you've got a solar setup, right? So at 9 o'clock in the morning, the high power shell script fires up and it runs the clocks all the way to boost clock, right? And then you've got another one, a second script, just like this one that we've been working on over here, where, you know, it'll drop the clock rate as low as it goes. And what that means is the machine isn't offline. You're not stopping that process altogether, but what you are doing is you're using, hammering the machine hardest when your power is the cheapest or available, right? And, all it would take to do that is a couple of shell scripts, which, I mean, a shell script is trivial, right? Like let's take a look at this, little pound, exclamation, /bin/sh, or whatever it could be bash, whatever the heck you want to use, and whatever your command is, And in this case, we stop it with the service PowerD stop. We could get rid of all of this stuff in the middle. You don't need all that. I mean, I just put that there for your guys' sake so you could see what the various options did. But realistically, this is like a 3-line shell script to control the power. And with a pair of these and, scheduling them with a cron tab, you could set this machine so that, it uses almost no power when the power is expensive and ramps it as fast as it goes when power is available cheap. So, but anyway, yeah, that's pretty much it, I think. Let's have a look at our script. Yeah, I think that's it. That's it for now, guys. PowerD on FreeBSD. If you need reliable, FreeBSD is where it's at, man. For real. Anyway, that's it for now, guys. GG's and 7 3s. But so one of the things that we're going to do here is, while we're testing this, is we're going to use this little command right here to tell us whether or not PowerD is running. So, copy and paste. Well, what do we got going on? Oh, we got all kinds of... Yeah, that's kind of weird. You know what? I think we got all kinds of PowerDs running for some reason. Okay, try that again. Boy, that is weird. Let's see what that's spitting out. I apologize, I'm not all here right now. It's too much stuff for my old brain to see. Actually, we're going to stretch that out, and then we're going to have another look at it. Okay, yeah, that should be working properly. Go up another one. There. Now we got somewhere. I don't know. For some reason... Let's see here. What do we got going on there? Yeah, that one should start controlling. Yeah, you'll notice that CPU frequency went to 2901. That was maximum boost clock for some reason. I've been fiddling with PowerD here, so, I may have done something. I don't know why the heck it did that, but it should be reporting as, I don't know, for some reason we've got 4 going on here. Move this on over again. Because again, my tired old brain can't do that. Oh yeah, we got the man pages for PowerD open, that's why. That's funny. Oh boy, where is it? Right there. Yeah, I had that open to show you, but anyway, moving right along. So yeah, that happens sometimes. Sometimes things don't go right. If we didn't have the man page open, what we would have seen properly is we would have seen a value of 2. But basically what we know right now is with PowerD running, we get 4 as a value. Because what we're doing is we're listing all the processes, then we're grepping for PowerD, and then we're filtering the number of those that come out, and we're using word count, WC, and counting the number of lines. And we're just piping all that stuff. It's basic Unix stuff. But anyway, so moving along. Yeah, that's kind of funny. Okay, so here's some other things that we can do. We're going to use this again.